Hey, superstars. We're going to talk about how to establish so what and who cares. This is applicable for most assessments. We're focusing on persuasive writing, but this can also be applied to analytical writing too. I will acknowledge, though, that this is adapted from a book, They Say, I Say. So if you want to get more involved with this kind of writing, then I encourage you to ask me to borrow the book or go and purchase one yourself. This really comes down to explaining what you say and why it matters. So, no matter how interesting you think something is, you always have to establish what is at stake, which means what does it matter if your contention was to happen, or if people pay attention to it, and tell people why they should care. Think of both your reasoning and consequences. So, for example, if you're arguing that, just as an example, that we need to have school uniforms, then think of reasons as to why, and then also think of consequences. Think about what happened if we didn't have uniforms. Think about what happened if we did enforce them. So, always be thinking about the future in your writing. I will also mention that in your marking guide for senior, you're going to have to reference cultural assumptions, attitudes, values, and beliefs. So, with your establishment of so what and who cares, you can think about that who, who question, answering things about cultural assumptions. So, you can apply it to certain groups, you can apply it to their attitudes, values, and beliefs. It isn't just a matter of writing the question, who cares, and then answering it. You have to do a few things before you get there. You need to consider very carefully the conversation you are entering into. So, what is the conversation that's already occurring? So, for example, if your contention was, for instance, that tradition is more important than progress, and you were arguing that, well, progress was more important, and you were using the example of Australia Day, well, think about the conversation around Australia Day. What are the recent events in the news? What are people arguing on blogs? Are there any academic articles that you can think about or look into to give you an understanding of the conversation you're about to talk about? You need to know your contention, your points, and your audience. And it's really crucial because you need to think of your audience before you can really say, well, so what to them, and let them know why what you say matters. These are templates that have been adapted from the book They Say, I Say, and you can use them in your writing. All you have to do, though, is make sure you take out the highlighted aspect and change it to match what you're writing. So make sure it matches your content, right? It has to match your content and your context. So, for example, these X challenge. So, for example, that could be these, facts or these statistics, whatever it may be. Challenge previous assumptions. You can also change things like who the people refers to. So, use these and manipulate them in ways that make sure your writing is understandable and it's clear. Also, draw your attention to the blank spaces and the ellipses. That means you're finishing the sentences or you're putting in some information that's missing. So make sure you edit those before you write your speech. Saying who cares is obviously important, but it isn't enough when you're persuading. You need to think of those larger consequences for your contention. You need to think about the what if. So think about the world in the future. If your contention was to come to the fore, or if people were to ignore you, what would happen? What are the consequences? And these are the templates you can use to help answer that question. So, same as before, you're trading the highlighted bits for your own information, but these will help you think in the way that makes sure you establish why what you say should be taken on board and why people should listen to you. This is an example of a student's work, and we're going to introduce some of the principles we've looked at today. What I want you to do is pause the video and have a read, just so you're up to speed with what we're going to be editing. When we're answering these questions of so what and who cares, they can go throughout a text or throughout a paragraph, sorry, but mainly we're looking down in the bottom section to add these things in. And we'll also be adding them into the middle as well, because what we want to do is think about, the evidence. Whoops, that's still highlighting. We want to think about the evidence that we're putting forward and why that applies to people. So that's where you're thinking about, well, so what? And who cares? Why does this evidence matter? And then you'll also be referencing it in your linking sentences as well, where you're telling me why what you said applies to your thesis. This is the final version of this paragraph. It isn't a perfect, it's not an A level as such, but it is making the right moves. So have a look down here. So this is where I've added in one of our templates. So at first glance, Australians might say we are disrespecting the past by changing the flag, but on closer inspection, we would be celebrating our independence and respectfully retiring our past to allow our nation to move forward. So I'm talking about the consequences there. Now, down here. So these changes will have significant implications for those wanting independence as a nation, as well as those who have suffered under the tyranny of British rule, such as the First Nations people, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Spelling mistake. Now, at the end here, I've also added in my own sentence that addresses and links together the paragraph nicely, and it would allow us to symbolically address another typo, the wounds of the past. So we're wanting to make sure we're constantly addressing who is being affected and what will happen. So you can use this to help prompt your writing. Think about where I've entered in with those extra sentences and have a look and compare it to your own paragraphs. Let me know if you have any questions, and good luck with your persuasive writing.